Hello everyone. I'm wanting to talk to you about my next bigger course, a 2-day course. And interesting, it's a course I've been teaching for like 40 years because it's and one of my favorites. It's the course in traditional 5-element acupuncture. Now this is different to Chinese medicine. And it's an interesting, I just want to give you a little bit of background and as to why, because particularly those people in America tend to think of acupuncturists and Chinese medicine much the same thing. Whereas if you're in Europe, it can be quite different, especially in colleges, etc. So a little history is that Chinese medicine was the original and major form of healthcare in China for, as you know, thousands of years. And it evolved basically a lot like Western medicine because the approach taken is to learn about the body and to take a case study and find out the problems that the patients had and the type of symptoms they had, and then to analyze them by checking their skin, their tongue, and feeling their pulses, and a general differential diagnosis. Coming up to terms, not so much medical terms, but like damp heat in the spleen and too much fire in the lungs, etc. And then accordingly they would prescribe medications. And those medications were often herbal, but sometimes are animal parts, all sorts of different things. But what it was based on is why it worked. I think sometimes it was just based on experiences in results, traditional knowledge, and sometimes by experimentation or even intuition. But they developed this huge amount. And they also utilized the concept of acupuncture and using acupuncture points on the body in order to speed up the processes and help balance out the different meridians, etc. Now, not all Chinese medical practitioners did that. In fact, there are still schools of Chinese medicine that do not use acupuncture because, strictly speaking, it's not part of it. But a lot did. And it's continued to go into it that now in China, Western medicine and Chinese medicine is very closely interwoven a lot. You'll get doctors of Western medicine who still use Chinese medical herbs and things like that, but they'll mix them in with Western drugs. It's a case of whatever's going to do the job best, right? And because even herbs had side effects, some of them were actually poisonous, and oftentimes you had to give a few herbs, the one to treat the patient and the other to treat the side effects of the original herb while it fixes the patient. And much the same, if you're giving them a drug that probably has side effects, at least they could use herbs to counteract those side effects. So it's developed into a major business. And then what came along is Chairman Mao, and in those early years, in the 1940s and so on, he brought about a revolution. And you see, what happened, there was another system, that the traditional 5-element Chinese, 5-element acupuncture, that was being practiced basically as part of the Taoist philosophy. So the people doing it were Taoists. And Taoists were really about living with nature, examining the seasons, the flow of the seasons from winter to summer, and the flow of the day, that's what we call the Chinese clock. They brought in the movement of the planets, etc. And they made this rather comprehensive factor belt based around the concepts of yin and yang and the 5 elements that make life flow, and related them to the body. And then they found that there were particular points on the arms and legs, that what they call command points, that they could manipulate that energy accordingly. And they also learned a specialized form of pulse reading. That's different to the Chinese medical pulse reading, which has like 28 categories and things like that. The Taoist is a much simpler version, but still very effective if you become good at it. And by putting it all together, it became a philosophy that had practical applications in treatment. And it also followed along certain traditions. For example, in areas there when you were treating wealthy people, and particularly women of stature, as it were, they were covered, like, drapes, and the only thing they exposed was their arms from the elbow down and their legs from the knees down. And so the Taoist acupuncturist had to diagnose from that by the texture of the skin, the hands, the feet, and by the pulses, and by the environment of what's going on, and to a certain extent by the symptoms. And that way, their treatments, they could just use points from the elbows down and the knees down. And it became a very specialized system. Eventually, in more recent years, they were able to introduce other body points as well, which improved the system. Now, like I said, Chairman Mao decided that was because it was Taoist in his background, it was religious. And of course, as you know, he was communist and anti-religion. So he started having them all rounded up and killed. So many of the top masters and everything managed to escape into Cambodia. Some stayed there, and there's some very good traditional acupuncture there. But a lot of them found their way into Europe. And that became a new nucleus for the traditional five-element acupuncture. And it's continued to be. And in Europe, European colleges, a lot of them are just that. They do traditional acupuncture. They don't do herbs and Chinese herbs and all that type of thing. And there's several colleges that do mix the two. But there are very few colleges in Europe that don't teach the traditional acupuncture. But you know, the major influences here in America were Chinese medicine, and particularly when Nixon went across, he very much promoted, and the focus was on what was happening in the major hospitals. In other words, the Chinese medical field, which included Chinese medicine. And as a result, that was the emphasis that was brought into America. And hence you find a strong emphasis is Chinese medicine that also uses some acupuncture. And although they often call themselves acupuncturists, and they are using acupuncture needles, so that's valid. But it is different. There are only a few colleges in America teaching the really traditional five-element acupuncture. Now, the college I ran and founded in Australia, we started out traditional acupuncture, the five-element acupuncture. That was our main factor. Eventually, after a number of years, we saw ourselves going towards licensing and registration, and because of the American influence, the way things over there, we decided to embrace then Chinese medicine, and I brought a couple of professors across from China, and that we incorporated that course. So we had to extend our course from 3 years full-time to 4 years full-time and reorganize it a bit, but we still taught them side by side. They don't conflict, they can complement if you taught the right way. But so not long after that I left, because I actually don't like Chinese herbal medicine. Just a personal preference, yet I recognize its immense ability and quality. I had to learn it because I was head of the college, but I've never really practiced as a Chinese medical herbalist. So now over the years, I have actually given this course on the theory of traditional five-element acupuncture to acupuncturist groups who wanted it, and they loved it. They had a great time. I love teaching it because it's a whole new dimension. It really gets much more into the ebb and flow of life within the body, and the movement of the energies according to the time of the year and the time of the day, and the disruptions that occur. And I've also done it to other groups, other professional groups like chiropractors and naturopaths and that, because although it didn't teach them how to needle or use needles, just the philosophy and the understanding alone gave them very, very good insight even into what can go on in the muscular contractions of the body, and with back problems and posture problems and so on. And they found it very informative and very enjoyable. So it puts just a different perspective on the way you look at patients. Now, I've often thought I'd like to do that with BodyTalk, and of course at this stage we've got a very solid nucleus in BodyTalk, but what is lacking for a lot of BodyTalkers is a broader context. A lot of our BodyTalkers have done acupuncture, or they've done chiropractic and that, and they have other broader contexts. But I want to be able to expand even our lay people who've done BodyTalk to give them a broader context and a deeper understanding of some of the dynamics behind BodyTalk, like you taught in Module 4. where you were introduced to the 5 elements. In Module 6 you're introduced to them, and you're introduced to things like the Chinese clock. But this one takes it a lot further, and it takes it to very much practical application, quite specifically, because if by teaching you the basic 5-element pulse and looking at the basic command points of the body and how they're arranged and how they work, then as a body talker you'll be able to use treatments on that, because you don't have to use needles. You can actually link the points, right? Or even better, you can do a cedry on the point, right, which is the technique of Audubon Primer Campus, and that has the same effect. And you'll also be able to measure the changes in the pulse and the shifts that go on. And the fact is, there are many patients where working at this level can help to make shifts and set things up for some of the more specific techniques we know in BodyTalk, the more specific formulas. But this is a very powerful overview of what is actually going on and the dynamics of it. And I'll couple it with what is commonly used, again, with in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, is some basic tongue diagnosis. There are 60 different types of tongue diagnosis, but some core stuff that tells you whether the problem is serious, whether it's a really serious problem or it's not, the prognosis, and general balance. You'll know whether it's much more a liver problem than it is a pancreas problem, and whether it's deficiency or excess, and how serious it is. It's really informative, and it's a lot of fun actually. You'll be going around asking, look at everyone's tongues. So the course to me is fun. And the idea is it'll take a couple of days, because I'll be taking you through the theory and then and teaching you the basic approach to taking the pulses, right? And then the way you put together formulas as a result of all that. And then from the formula situation, that if you want to learn it and learn the command points, you could then utilize it by utilizing BodyTalk. And but other than that, it just having this knowledge, taking the pulses, etc., will enable you to get very much deeper insights into your patient, what's going on, and measure the changes, no matter how you address it, whether it's just straight BodyTalk or whether it's a combination of other things. So it's a fun course for me. I really enjoy it, and I think you will too. And it's simple enough. A lot of it you've probably heard in bits and pieces in the other courses I've taught, but I'm going to bring it all together, go into a lot more depth, and show practical applications of applying it directly from a traditional acupuncture point of view. So it's me going back to my early roots. I was teaching this stuff 40 years ago, and I loved teaching it, and I've never forgotten it, don't worry. So I look forward to seeing you at the course. It should be a fun course. Thank you.